The Schengen system of free movement was established in the 1990s. I mean, Spice Girls are great, but it's not the 90s anymore.
Welcome to Inside Brussels, the European Conservative monthly news show, bringing you the hottest topics from the heart of Europe. Despite the EU completing its flagship policy package, the Migration Pact, last spring, the most burning issues of illegal migration were never solved, and Europe is spiraling into an ever greater crisis. The external borders are still unprotected, prompting member states to reinstate internal border checks to prevent failed asylum seekers from roaming freely in Europe, even if that slowly destroys everyone's freedom of movement within the Schengen area. Meanwhile, migrant perpetrators continue to dominate crime statistics across Europe. Deportation levels remain disastrously low, and authorities are hindered by excessive bureaucracy. And those who want to change all this are threatened with massive fines or long years in prison. Still, the majority of member states are slowly waking up to this reality, placing increased pressure on Brussels for things to finally change. The main point that EU leaders are discussing in this week's EU Council summit right now is how to address all these shortcomings and fill the gaps left by the Migration Pact. Even though conservatives have been mocked and criticized for taking a tougher stance against illegal migration for years, as our cities and countries are becoming unrecognizable, now even the mainstream parties have begun to realize that swift action is needed if Europeans don't want to become simply cultural minorities in their own homelands. Today, we'll talk to three members of the European Parliament about the primary issues related to migration in the EU, as well as their causes and possible solutions. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio today.
Thank you for the invitation.
We see that European countries started to reinstating internal border checks one by one again, fueling a political discussion about the so-called death of the Schengen area. Could this be viewed as a symptom of the EU's failed migration policy and the lack of external border controls?
Surely, yes. It's a very interesting situation, actually, because I do remember very well the electoral campaign that we had a few months ago only for the European elections. And in that campaign, you have really seen that the Green parties, the Socialist parties and so on were very much advocating a continuation of the migration policy of the European Union as we knew it over the last years. So they have now a problem, I think, a political problem, because they are part of the von der Leyen coalition, and Mrs. von der Leyen has now already announced a dramatic change in the EU policy because exactly of the problems that we encounter with migration over the last year. So I would say that it is a confirmation of our conservative criticism towards the migration policy during the electoral campaign, coming soon after the electoral campaign. And for sure it is also a clear admission that there is a failure in our European migration policies over the last years. A very, very clear admission of that fact, yes.
What you mentioned, that this is exactly it, that we might say a change of heart coming from the Commission. Recently, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen sent out a new migration strategy to all member states, promising or at least proposing to significantly ramp up deportations and strengthen external borders. Is this a genuine? Is it the beginning of a genuine change from Brussels?
I think it's absolutely necessary, and it must be a genuine change, but the success of it will depend on a huge number of factors. First of all, the member states have to go along, and in some member states it is very evident that it's going to succeed or that there will be enough political support for a change of policy, because the governments have no other choice. Look at Germany, for instance, where the local elections have sent a very clear signal to the government, the recent local elections or the national elections in Austria or other elections in other countries, that the people, the general public, is just not willing to continue on the line that we had known over the last years. So there's an enormous pressure in some countries. In other countries that maybe are less concerned or have very leftist governments, it might be more difficult. So it is important that all member states realize how serious the situation is. And indeed, since you were mentioning also Schengen, I mean, the survival of the Schengen system is depending on our success to make our external borders secure. There's one important point, just one sentence is in Mrs. von der Leyen's letter that I would like to underline, and that is that the credibility of our border system and the continuous application of the Schengen systems are instrumental for the competitivity of the European Union. We cannot survive as an economic area if we have national borders again with all kinds of controls, all kinds of obstacles. So for us, the mastering, I would say, of the external borders and the limitation of the irregular or illegal flows of immigrants are really a very important aspect of the future of our common economic area. So the free circulation of persons, but also the economic future of the European Union is depending on a success of the new migration policy.
One other interesting point of von der Leyen's plan was the possibility of copying Italy's offshore reception and deportation centers that they set up in Albania. Do you think there's enough political will in Brussels to implement something similar at the European level?
I would say yes, but you know, again, the success, if you want to evaluate the success of a political measure, you have to project it in time, in the future, and then make an evaluation. I just want to remind you of the beginning of the migration crisis in 2015, where many people left UNHCR camps in Syria, in the Middle East, and in other places in order to come to Europe. And in those days, there were arguments like the conditions in those camps are just not humane enough, and it's understandable that these people want to leave those camps, and we did not do enough to support UNHCR in order to make the living conditions in those camps acceptable. So I would say if we take care of those camps and make them really worse of a human being, of living there for some time before going back to the home country, it can succeed. But if we run into a situation in which the media will show very difficult conditions of living, people being treated badly or not enjoying all their rights as they should, then of course we are facing over time, over the next years, a failure of the system, and then we will be in an even more difficult situation than we are now. So I would say that yes, there is enough political will now to have external hubs in third countries or whatever. I think that the pressure, political pressure, is there, but in order to make a success over time, we have to take care in a very responsible way of the living conditions and in the general conditions in which we are going to set up such hubs in third countries, and is a huge responsibility, I would think, and we have to commit sufficient financial resources to this.
Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for the question and your time also.
Thank you so much for your time. You've been one of the loudest critics in the Parliament of the European Union's Migration Pact for leaving many issues and questions unanswered. Your party, the Sweden Democrats, put forward a new initiative, the Deportation Pact, as a complementary package to the Migration Pact. What are the main issues with the Migration Pact, and what are your proposals to fix them?
Well, the Migration Pact is to a large extent about redistribution, and that's a problem. How many are we supposed to redistribute? The pact says 30,000, or countries can pay themselves out of it, which Sweden definitely will do. But the amount of asylum seekers in 2023 was 1.1 million. What are we going to do with all these people who enter EU territory? Will they abscond? Most of them do. Will they be sent back to their home countries? Most of them aren't. Only 20% of rejected asylum seekers are sent back. So what we must do is to prevent illegal entries to the European Union. We must enable swift transfers and deportations, and also to enact a deportation mechanism in which we use carrots and sticks towards countries of origin, using trade, aid, and other tools to make them accept back their own citizens.
A more recent proposal from your party, the Sweden Democrats, was an internal travel ban on criminals convicted of serious crimes, such as gang activities, which could be an answer to the growing numbers of migrant gang crimes. So as countries are being forced to close their borders within or inside the Schengen area, do you think this is could be a first step, or at least like a reminder or a wake-up call to establishment parties to make some changes in this regard?
Well, the Schengen system of free movement was established in the 1990s. I mean, Spice Girls are great, but it's not the 90s anymore. So we need to take into account that organized crime is using this free movement, illegal aliens as well. And the result of that very free system is that country after country enacts internal border controls. And we have said that in order for any free movement to take place in the future, we need to secure the external border first, of course, but we also need individual travel bans. For instance, Islamists, criminals, illegal migrants, they should not be able to roam freely in the European Union.
We saw the Netherlands and then Hungary in the recent weeks requesting an opt-out from the EU's joint migration policy. What are the chances for them to succeed? And do you think there might be other countries to follow their example?
The only way to succeed with an opt-out is to say no before the legislation passes, like Denmark did. They have an opt-out from the EU migration scheme, but I would encourage countries such as the Netherlands, Hungary, maybe even Poland nowadays as well, to work with us to enable pushbacks to be legalized like Finland did, like Poland is about to do, like the Baltic states are considering, to work with those in the Commission who wants to externalize migration management outside the EU border. That's the realistic thing to do today, and we should really now use the momentum that we see when even a person such as Ursula von der Leyen is opening up for external deportation centers. I mean, let's go for it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Borchia, for joining me in the studio today. Last month, it came as a shock to hear that Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini is being persecuted for only protecting Europe's external borders, and now he may face 6-year prison term for not letting a NGO ship full of illegal migrants to disembark in Lampedusa in 2019. What do you expect from next week's trial?
Well, I don't have any great expectations by Italian justice, because they show in several cases that in Italy, I think that the justice is very ideologically oriented, let's say that, and so I can't make any. I can't foresee what will happen. But in general, there will be the general allocution of Attorney Giulia Bongiorno, the lawyer to Matteo Salvini, and she will have the opportunity to explain what happened. In particular, in my opinion, it is necessary to underline to the European public opinion that everyone who was in need was allowed to disembark. And so we can't complain about illegal migration in Europe if we don't support who received a mandate from his electors and he respects it. So let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. But in general, we should be able to launch the message that justice, not only in Italy but all over Europe, should be independent and far from any ideology.
Of course, Salvini's persecution is connected to the deep-running problem of NGOs aiding illegal migration through the Mediterranean, and also even directly cooperating with human smugglers. Can EU member states stand up to these practices, and if yes, how?
In my opinion, we should change approach, because it was very clear that without a migration project, it's very hard to get to a real integration. On the other hand, it doesn't make sense to think that Europe would be able to solve the problem of third countries, and in my opinion as well, it's not a good idea to continue with an Eurocentric perspective, because our Europe is not on the first level on the economic point of view. Every one of us is aware about the GDP data. And so I think that we should be able to change our approach. And from one side, if there are situations of humanitarian complexity, people escaping from conflicts, from wars, I think that it's right that we try to help them. But on the other hand, if we have a look to the figures, the majority of illegal migrants are not entitled to the international protection, and so it's not possible to go on with this approach and trying to get the illusion that in Europe there is a space for everybody.
Nonetheless, Italy managed to reduce the number of illegal entries, yes, while other countries like Greece and Spain are continuing to register extreme numbers still. So what is the secret of Italy? And I'm sorry, do you think that as the migration reception centers that are about to become fully operational as of tomorrow will help the situation?
I think so. I think so, because it's very important the quality of the message you send to the public opinion on the third countries. I mean, if for example I come from a third country and I'm perfectly aware that I couldn't be entitled to international protection, and I would like to get to Europe, maybe because I think that I can have money, I can enjoy the welfare state without working. If I'm aware that I'm not landing to Italy, but I'm landing to Albania, so in a extra EU country, maybe I can change my mind. I think that we should be able to find a way to give the priority to people really in need, and the idea of decentralizing some identification center outside the EU, in my opinion, could be a brilliant idea.
Thank you so much, Mr. Borchia.